What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next we are going to go over the top 10 Bronze Age Grail level books and which ones look like they might be good to be picking up right now. So stay tuned. All right, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. Also, remember, I've got my giveaway going on right now. I put that out in the video probably about right before this. Just look for one of my videos with a thumbnail that says free giveaway. Go check that out for the rules on how to win that book. It's a raw X-Men number 9, so make sure to go check that one out. So the reason I decided to make this video, because I had done a top 10 Silver Age Grail video in the past, maybe about a year ago. I'd never done a Bronze Age one, but there was a huge sale this week for one of these Bronze Age Grail level books. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about those books, take a look at the pricing on them as well, and see if there are any that look like maybe they've come back down now to the point where you might want to be either watching them or looking at picking them up. And definitely some of the books on this list will probably surprise you. There are some that aren't necessarily the ones that come to mind right away when you think of those Bronze Age keys. Now, the big sale was for a 9.4, and so because of that, all the books that I'm going to talk about here, it's for their selling price at a 9.4. Now, the order can definitely shift because I'm going to do them in the order of their value, and so the order can definitely shift if you go down in grade, up in grade, all that kind of thing. But this is for a 9.4. It gives you a good idea in general for these books. Now, this is in the order of value, not necessarily in the order of importance for that book, so just keep that in mind. Nobody get mad at me if your favorite book isn't the number one book, on this list, that kind of thing. But we've got 10 books here I'm going to talk about, plus one honorable mention because I figured people might get mad if I don't put that book in this video. But please feel free to comment if there's any on here you think should have been on the list that I didn't put in here. Try to find the ones that are really those top value books, especially in that 9.4 grade. But let's get into these books. All right, so let's start with the honorable mention. I added this one here in addition to the 10 because I figured if I didn't have the first appearance of Punisher, Amazing Spider-Man 129 on this list, that I would hear about it in the comments. Now, there is one that I don't have in here that I expect to hear from people, and that's Tomb of Dracula 10. I checked the values. It doesn't belong on this list, but Amazing Spider-Man number 129, that is the honorable mention that I've got. Obviously, first appearance of Punisher, first appearance of the Jackal, that ever so important character. And you can see this book has a ton of copies out there that are graded. There are 15,931 copies total on the census, with 13,932 universal. Then in a 9.4, there are 782. And I was looking at the 9.8s as well, and we've got 161. So when we're talking about a lot of these Marvel Bronze Age books, you're going to see that it's something that's pretty consistent throughout this list, is that there are a ton of them out there. And that's actually one of the things that I think really has caused the issue over the last year with the spike in prices and then that retraction in prices, is because there's so many of them that people start undercutting each other quite a bit on price. When the prices get up to a certain point, people are just like, yeah, I'll sell that book for that price. And they put them up for sale, and they just keep putting them up for sale until it starts getting back down into that price range where it had been historically. But with this book, the current price right now is about $5,100. This one really is back in its trend line right now. And so this is a book that I would personally be watching. I think it's one that in a lot of grades, it might be reasonable to start considering again, at least put it on that watch list. All right, so now let's move to number 10 on the list. Number 10, Werewolf by Night. Number 32, first appearance of Moon Knight. Awesome cover. Now this book, I'd say like last year or earlier this year, would have been much higher up on this list. This book had spiked considerably with the comic boom, with the Moon Knight show, all that kind of stuff. But the show wasn't received all that well. There's not too much certainty about what's going to go on in the future. And so the prices on this book have fallen considerably. The total census of this book is 5,033 with 4,687 universals. Now, the numbers that I pulled were from the CGC census. I don't know why Go Collect has slightly different numbers for some of these books, but the numbers that I'm referencing are specifically from the CGC census. There are 222 in a 9.4 and just 19 in a 9.8. Now, there are a lot less of these graded than the Amazing Spider-Man 129, but still, relatively, percentage-wise, a lot less 9.8s, which is why the 9.8 of this book is actually extremely expensive. But for a 9.4, this book is currently at $7,000. This is an estimate because it has not sold for a couple of months. But this one is still above that trend line. I think that this one is one to avoid right now. Not a book that I would be picking up. I think it still has a little ways to go. And so if you're interested in picking up that first appearance of Moon Knight, it's one that I would not be buying right now. I would be watching it and just waiting and seeing what happens with those prices. All right, so now on to number 9. This is the first DC book that we're going to talk about. And this is Green Lantern number 76. Now, this one, you might not have expected to see this book on this list. But when we're talking about a 9.4, this is a book that is extremely rare in grade, and that causes the price of this book to spike considerably as the grade gets higher. So you can see from the census there's just 2,540. We're looking at the difference between that book and Amazing Spider-Man number 129. There's about 5 times as many copies of Amazing Spider-Man 129 graded out there than this one. And so that's why these are also the reasons why these books don't tend to get that downward pressure quite as much with the prices, because you don't have as many out there pushing the prices down. But there's 1,937 universal copies with just 46 9.4s, only 2 9.8s. This is a book that when you get into these high grades, because of rarity, it makes it a very expensive book. This is considered the first Bronze Age book, the book that started the Bronze Age. It is an awesome Neil Adams cover, one of my favorite covers. I have a 9.2 of this book, and it's just, I love this book. It was on my keepers list for a while. I recently cut it from the keepers list. But yeah, incredible book. Now, this isn't really a book that has price spikes or anything like that there isn't really spec in this book. It's a key because it's that first Bronze Age book. It's an amazing Neil Adams cover. It kind of stays relatively flat for the most part, maybe trends a little bit up, a little bit down, that kind of thing. But the price of this one I had at $7,500, a 9.6 sold for $20,400 just this last week in that Signature Heritage auction. So 9.6, this book had a monster sale, but 9.4, I have it as $7,500. I believe there is one that's coming up on Comic Link, either Comic Link or Comic Connect. So it'd be interesting to see what that one actually sells for. But not a book that spikes or anything like that. I'd say it's more of a personal taste type book. If it's a book you want, then yeah, go for it. You can get it for much more affordably in the lower grades. This is one of those books that would not maintain this position on the list if we're talking about mid-grade books or lower grade books. All right, so now let's move to number 8. We're jumping back to Marvel, another really high census count book. This is Giant Size X-Men number 1, first appearance of the new X-Men, including Colossus, Storm, Nightcrawler, and second full appearance of Wolverine, even though it's his 4th time that you see him in comics, because you've got 180, 181, 182, and then this book. Now, again, another book that just has a ton of copies on census, 12,204 total copies with 10,976 universals. In a 9.4, there are 591 copies. Not as many as Amazing Spider-Man number 129, but still quite a few of them. 9.8, there are still 219 copies out there. So there are a lot of high-grade copies. And again, this is one of the reasons why when this book in a 9.8 spiked to like $75,000 or $80,000, that's what caused the pressure on it to coming back down, is that it's now going for around 35, maybe 40,000. It's just because there are enough of those copies out there that people just kept listing them, and eventually that price comes back down. Now, in a 9.4, current price of this book is about $9,000. Still above its trend line, one that's still trending down. Definitely a book that I would personally still wait. If you wanted to pick this one up, I would wait on it. Now, all of this is with the caveat that anytime Marvel could be like, hey, here's the X-Men, and that could have an impact on the price of these books. They could jump more after that. But based on the current trends, everything that I see with this book, one that I would personally be avoiding for now and just waiting to see if those prices continue to come down. Now, I've got GPA open here just to kind of show you an example. Now, let's look at a 9.4. And you can see I said that the current price was about 9,000 because it's had a low sale of 8,400 and its last sale was 93.46. But you can see where this book has been trending lately. A lot of sales within the mid to high 8,000s, 10,000s, low 9,000s. But what I like to do is I just like to kind of look at a general trend for this book. And if you look at the general trend this book has taken over the last, say, 6-7 years, you can see that it's still not there yet. Where my little pointer is here, I think it still has some room to come down. And so that's why I would just be patient on this book if you're interested in picking up Giant Size X-Men #1. All right, now let's move back to DC. I love this book. This is a great one. This is the Bernie Wrightson cover, incredible cover. First appearance of Swamp Thing, House of Secrets, #92. Again, another book that has a lot less copies graded than its Marvel key counterparts. Only 3,083 total copies on census with 2,736 universal. Just 42 in a 9.4. This is a dark cover. This book is extremely difficult to get in high grade. I mean, check out those 9.8 numbers. Just 3. Just 3 copies in a 9.8, which is just crazy. I don't think you hardly ever see that book come up for sale in a 9.8. I don't know if there's been a 9.8 sale that I can recall recently. But current price for a 9.4, $9,500. Again, not a grade that sells often enough to really have a spike in price. But with this book, if you look at other grades, most of them have really corrected back down to or near their trend line. This is definitely one that if you're interested in picking up this first appearance of Swamp Thing, I would be looking at this book. I think this book is a much safer book than any of the other ones that I've talked about so far that you could really start to consider looking at. It's really come back to that trend line because it's had a couple price spikes historically. We can take a look at House of Secrets 92. So there was that Swamp Thing show that came out on HBO, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. That caused a spike in the price of this book. Then we had the comic boom, which caused a little bit of a spike in the price of this book as well. Let's look at some of the lower grades that sell a little more often. And here's a 7.0. You can see with this trend, it's really more or less in line with where it had been going previously. Here's the spike from that show. Here's the spike from the comic boom, and it's retreated some from that comic boom price. In a 7.0, it looks like it could probably stand to come down a little bit more. But then say, let's look at maybe a 5.0. The 5.0, you can see here, it's maybe even overcorrected a little bit. It's down below where it was in that trend line previously. So definitely a book that if you're interested in that first appearance of Swamp Thing, one that I would really be considering right now. I would at least feel comfortable going out and purchasing this book versus some of these other books that I think have some room to go down still. All right, so jumping back to Marvel, this is the one that I think a lot of people would probably think was the #1 book on the list, but it is not. This is Incredible Hulk #181, first appearance of Wolverine. Or just so people don't, write in the comments, first full appearance of Wolverine. He shows up on the last page of Hulk 180. But this is the book that commands the most value. This is the book that most people want. It's got him on the cover. This book has, I think, the most of any of the books that I talk about on this list graded. It has 16,274 total copies on census. 12,945 universals, which is a little less than the Amazing Spider-Man 129, but the total census is more. Now, there are 542 in a 9.4, 137 in a 9.8, and there is a single 9.9. Now, if we're talking about what the most valuable graded book out there is today, guaranteed it is that single 9.9. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about grade for grade at a 9.4. What are the most valuable books? And so, yes, that 9.9 Hulk 181 easily would be the highest selling book. I wouldn't be shocked if that book broke 1 million, maybe 2 million if it came up for sale. Just the person that could say, for Wolverine, one of the most popular characters, probably the second most popular Marvel character, to have the single highest graded copy, I could just see the bidding just going crazy for that book. But the 9.4, it's actually a pretty big jump for number 6 here on the list versus number 7. This is $14,500 for a 9.4. This is another book that is still above its trend line, but it is getting closer. It's trending down. If you wanted this book, I would continue to wait. I think you have some more for this book to fall. Now, I know there have been announcements about Wolverine appearing in Deadpool, that kind of thing. It doesn't really seem to have moved the prices on this book, though. And I think a big part of that is that these announcements, for when the book is already above its trend line, the announcements aren't having nearly as much of an impact on the price of the book, because it's like the book is already higher than it would have been historically. They tend to sell a few more copies, but they aren't really causing price jumps. So again, this is a book that if you want this one, and I think most people do want this book, I would be more patient with it still, because I could see this book continuing to trend down. All right, now to number 5, and this is where it starts to get interesting with these books. We're sticking with Marvel. This is Iron Fist number 14, but it is the 35-cent variant. If you're not familiar with this book was actually in the standard price was 30 cents, but they had a select set of markets where they were testing out price increases, and that price increase was to 35 cents. Because this was only in a select set of markets, the print counts, or the numbers of these that were distributed that are out there, are very low. And you can see that with the census numbers there. This one has just 72 copies graded. And this is a book that is worth so much that in just about any grade, or I would say any grade, someone would send this in to get graded. So I think a high percentage of those books are probably graded. Just 65 universals, 3 and a 9.4, 4 and a 9.6, 0 9.8 exist of this book. Current price, and I had to rough estimate this based on some other sales, based on what that book is going for with its standard price, have it at about $15,000 plus. Now, this is a book that generally sells for about 14 to 15 times the standard priced copy. And so that's why the standard price is going for around 900 to 1,000 right now. So I could see this one hitting 15,000 or more, because as you go up into those higher grades, they tend to sell for a little bit even more of a premium. So I could easily see this one hitting 15,000 plus if one of those 3 copies came up for sale. Now, this is a book that if you see this book come up for sale and it is within reason, within that kind of 14 to 15 times the multiple of the standard price, you buy this book. If you could afford it, you buy this book, because it is just so rare. People want this book. And I know some people will say, I don't care about the price variance, just like some people don't care about Mark Jewelers inserts or National Diamond inserts or newsstand versus direct, that kind of thing. But there are enough people, plenty of people that do care about it. And this is the type of information that's important to have when you're out there, because if you come across a book like this Iron Fist 14 that has that 35 cents, this book is extremely valuable. And you can see that here with a 9.4 being worth $15,000, worth more than a Hulk 181 in the same grade. All right, now to number 4, and we're actually moving back into a standard book. This is Marvel Spotlight number 5. I think this one is probably also one that's a surprise to a lot of people. So this is the first appearance of Ghost Rider, and Ghost Rider is in no way on the same level as Wolverine or the first new X-Men in terms of the importance of the character. He's a popular character. He's a lower level character than either of those, the first new X-Men, first Wolverine, and that kind of thing. But this is one of those books where when you're talking about high grades, in high grades, this book is so difficult to get that it accelerates in value more than those other books. And so with that black background, very difficult in high grade. And so this one has 5,227 copies graded, just 4,638 universals, quite a bit less than Hulk 181, quite a bit less than Giant Size X-Men 1 and Amazing Spider-Man 129. Part of that might be availability of the book, but I think the other part of it is that those other books are worth more in the lower grades than this one, and maybe there's more motivation to send them in to get graded. Now, in a 9.4 though, I mean, this is where you start to see the difference. Just 89 copies. That's versus for the Hulk 181, 542 copies. For the Giant Size X-Men 1, 591 copies. And for the Amazing Spider-Man 129, 782 copies. So much more rare in that 9.4. When you get to the 9.8, it's even more ridiculous. Just 4 copies in a 9.8. This book is extremely rare. One actually came up for sale last year on Heritage, sold for $264,000 in a 9.8. In a 9.8, this is actually the most expensive book that's out there right now. Now, if it came up for sale today, I don't think this book would hit $264,000. I think if it came up for sale today, it would probably be around $200 because the book has come down in general since that sold kind of peak comic boom. So I do think it's probably more like a $200,000 book, but that's still a lot more than Hulk 181 that recently has been selling around $90,000 or $95,000 in a 9.8. And like I said, with Giant Size X-Men 1, a 9.8 selling for around $35,000 to $40,000. So this book in high grade, very expensive. But a 9.4, about $17,000. This is a book that is still well above its trend line. I could see this one dropping quite a bit further. And so one that I personally would be avoiding right now if you're looking to pick one up. If you're looking to pick one up, if you find it for a great deal, maybe that's another story. But a book that I personally would be avoiding because I think it could drop quite a bit further. A big part of the spike, I mean, you had the comic boom, but I think the other part of it was that massive 9.8 sale. I think that caused a ripple effect through the other grades that caused them to just go up way too far, way too fast. And I think this is a book that could continue to drop moving forward. All right, now to number 3, and we're going to move to some more obscure books now. I mean, we've got Gold Key here, topping all those major Marvel keys. And this is Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Number 1. This is the first appearance of Scooby and the gang in comics. Look at that census count. This is a book that is very, very rare with respect to Bronze Age books. Just 340 total copies on census, 324 universal copies. Now let's look at those high grades though. In a 9.4, there's just 2. There are no 9.6s, no 9.8s. Those 2 9.4s are the highest on census. There are 7 9.2s, 1 9.0. This book just does not exist in high grade, and it has a high price because of that. Now, this book has never sold publicly in a 9.4. There is no recorded sale in GPA, for example, of a 9.4, no recorded sale in Go Collect for a 9.4. I have estimated the value of this book in a 9.4 of $25,000 or more. I think it would hit $25,000 pretty easily, and it could go for more than that as well. A 9.2 sold in November of this year for $12,600. So I don't think $25,000 plus is an unreasonable number for that 9.4. Now, this also is one of those books that accelerates very rapidly in price as you move up in grade. It is expensive in low grades too. This is not a cheap book by any means in any grade, but in those high grades, it gets very, very expensive quickly. Now, with respect to if this is a buy right now or not, this isn't really a book, again, that has spec value to it, anything like that. There isn't really anything that's going to jump the price in this book. This is a book that tends to generally gradually go up over time. It had a little bit of a jump over the comic boom, but it has been pretty consistent. So if you find one for a reasonable price, I'd say, and you want it, you want this book, then I would say go for it. There's no big risk with buying a copy of this book. And just for transparency, I do have a copy. I do have one up for sale, so I'm not trying to pump this book or anything like that. But this is a book that I think is a pretty safe purchase, but it is very difficult to get even in mid grades. All right, now for number 2. And I think this is one that maybe a lot of people don't even really know about or aren't really familiar with. And this is Cerebus the Aardvark number 1. This is the first appearance of Cerebus the Aardvark. I may be pronouncing his name wrong. I don't know, but that's how I pronounce it. Again, another low census count book. This one just has 335 total copies with 278 universals. Again, those are the numbers I pulled from the CGC census. I don't know why they're different on Go Collect. I don't know what the reason is for that discrepancy there. But when we're talking about the census here as well, at least according to the CGC census, it does not say there's a 9.6. It says there are 2 9.4s, 2 9.2s, and 5 9.0s. So that's what I'm going with on this, that the 9.4 is the highest graded copy that is out there. So for a 9.4, I'd estimate the current price to be $40,000 plus. This is one that has come up for sale. In 2019, a 9.4 sold for $12,250. But in April of this year, an 8.0 sold for $8,160. This book has gone up considerably over the last year. Estimating that single highest graded copy, because again, I don't think that there's a 9.6 out there despite what this says, but estimating that single highest graded copy sale is very difficult. But I think this is a book that could hit 40,000 based on how much other books and other grades have jumped. So this is a niche collector type book, but there is serious demand for it when this book does come up at auction. Now, personally, I would not be buying this book right now. Like I said, this book has gone up considerably over the last couple of years. For example, a 7.5 in 2020 was about a $1,600 book. Now, I believe it was this year or late last year, it's about a $7,000 book. It's gone up about 4 times. And so that's where I got that, 12,000 and going up to about 40,000. But yeah, not a book that I personally would be going after right now if you're interested in this. I think it just got too hot in the comic boom over the last year to 2 years. And so I would be patient with it if you're interested in this one, because I could see this book correcting pretty significantly. All right, so now to number 1. And after I go over number 1, I've got a table where I've got them all together so we can kind of see these compared next to each other. So we can really see which ones might be worthwhile to go after right now and which ones you might want to wait, see what happens. So number 1, this is Star Wars number 1, the 35-cent price variant. This book has consistently been considered the top book of the Bronze Age, at least in terms of value. It is not as rare as the Iron Fist 14, but there's just more demand for it. And historically, this book has sold for significantly more in the same grades. Now, on the census, 297 total copies with 265 universals, 13 in a 9.4, 2 in a 9.6, 0 copies in a 9.8. Now, this book, it sold for $56,400 this last weekend on that Heritage Signature auction. This was a monster sale for this book. This was a new record. Its prior record had been from September of 2021, where it sold for $40,800. So a jump of $15,600. This is, in grade for grade, this is the king of the Bronze Age. Now, this is a book that in the same grade, when you compare it to the standard copy, the 30-cent copy, this book sells for about 45 times what that standard price copy sells for. But as you get to higher and higher grades, that accelerates. In the 9.4, a standard copy is about $500 right now. This sold for 112 times that standard price. That's what the demand is for these price variant books, especially when it's a key. Price variants will often sell for somewhat of a premium, especially if you're talking higher grades, but when it's a key, that really accelerates. Now, this is a book I would love to own a copy of this variant someday. I think that would be awesome to own. I've bid on them a few times, but I've never been able to take one of them home. But I mean, let's talk about what this book might be if it was in a 9.8. Because if we compare this 9.4 to Marvel Spotlight number 5, the one that in a 9.8 sold for around 264,000 or 200,000, I think it would probably sell for today. This one sells for over 3 times what Marvel Spotlight number 5 sells for in the same grade. I wouldn't be surprised if a 9.8 was ever found, if a 9.8 was ever graded for Star Wars number 1 in this 35-cent variant, that I think it would break $500,000. I think it would not be unreasonable to think that that book would break the $500,000 mark, being a single highest graded copy and just that number 1 value book for the Bronze Age, and then just having that top graded copy. So yeah, Star Wars number 1, massive sale this last week, $56,400, just incredible, just crushing all the other books out there. The only other one that I think would get kind of close, like I said, is that Cerebus number 1, but that's a guess. I mean, it may sell for a lot less than that. It may sell for more than that. I don't know, but we'd have to see if that book came up for sale again. All right, so now let's look at all of these next to each other. So I've got them numbered out 1 through number 10, as well as the honorable mention. You can see the price in the 9.4. You can see all of them compared against one another, with the Amazing Spider-Man 129 starting at $5,100, going all the way up to that Star Wars number 1 35-cent variant at $56,400. But I think it's also interesting to have all of this next to each other, because it really shows you how that rarity and grade, how that really impacts these books, where they are on the list and why they appear on the list. Because you might not normally expect to see that Green Lantern 76 on this list, but you've got just 46 copies at a 9.4 on the census, which causes this book to have so much more value to it. You can also see that the lower number census books tend to dominate the top of this list. Marvel Spotlight 5 is definitely an exception with the 4,638. But look at that Star Wars number 1, 265, then Cerebus, 278, Scooby-Doo, 324, Iron Fist 35-cent variant, 65. Very low census count books dominating the top of that list. And that's just where that limited supply really drives the demand and drives the prices for these books. Now, on the far right, I've got what would be my recommendation. And again, everybody should do their own research if they're looking to go buy a book, especially if you're spending this kind of money on a book. But this is based on what I saw with the data, what I consider with these books. So I've got recommendations there with, buy within reason, don't buy because it's going to correct, that kind of thing. And I highlighted some of them, as you can see here. Ones that are highlighted in yellow, I think, are ones that I would consider picking up right now. I would feel safe buying those books right now. The ones in orange are ones that I would consider watching. And then all the other ones are either don't buys, or that Green Lantern 76. Like I said, that's a very unique case. It's not really a key like the other ones are keys. It's not a first appearance, anything like that. And so that one's up to you. It's a personal collector preference. Me, I think it's an awesome book, but other people might not care about that book at all. But you can see here, the ones that I think are good to buy within reason are the Star Wars number 1 35-cent variant, Scooby-Doo number 1, Iron Fist 14 35-cent variant, and House of Secrets 92. So within reason, I mean, you don't have to go out there and overpay for the book. Look at the general history of what these books have been selling for, and if it's in that range, yeah, sure, go for it. House of Secrets 92 is the one that I really feel has come back to that trend line more than any other of these books, because I watch a lot of sales. I watch a lot of Silver and Bronze Age sales, and I've been seeing Silver and Bronze falling a lot. And so it's just something to be cautious about if you're looking to buy Bronze Age books. But House of Secrets 92 for Swamp Thing, that's one that really has come back down to that line in many grades, that trend. And so I would feel much more safe buying that one than a lot of these others. Now, the ones that I don't have highlighted on the list, like I said, those are the ones that I would personally be avoiding right now. You can watch them, but I would expect more correction with those books. That's the Cerebus number 1, Marvel Spotlight number 5, Giant Size X-Men number 1, and Werewolf by Night 32. All of those books I would be more cautious about right now. Now, the ones that I would watch, we've got Hulk 181 and Amazing Spider-Man 129. Those books both went up considerably over the last year or so, and they have come down quite a bit. They're also two of the most popular characters out there. You've got First Wolverine and First Punisher. So there's demand for those books, but they all got overheated. Now, they've been coming back to their trend lines, so I would definitely be watching them, but I still think that you could be safe waiting a little bit longer. There's no rush to need to go out and buy them right now. So hopefully this helps some people out. If you're looking at Bronze Age books, just kind of an idea where these prices are at right now, which books you might want to consider going after, which ones you might want to avoid, and just wait and see. So if you found this useful, make sure to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. Again, remember, I've got that giveaway going on. Make sure to go check out that video for your chance to win that X-Men number 9. If you'd like to see more of my videos, I've got more videos over here. Make sure to click them quick because they're going to disappear. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, I've got the subscription button here. That one will disappear too, but you can go find that subscription button somewhere else as well. And I will see you in the next video.